Hello, this is Gary Larson. I want to give a quick demo, a relatively quick demo of the form automation we created for FWCCN. First, I want to talk about our tech stack. Hardware needed will be a dedicated computer for a server, a Wi-Fi network with a Wi-Fi router, laptop computers to connect to the Wi-Fi network. The software that will need to be installed on the server is Node.js, Next.js, MongoDB with Mongoose, and GitHub, or Git more specifically. This is a quick overview of the setup and installation. I'm not going to get into the details of reading through this here, but this is just located here in the slides for a reference with the links to the downloads. What I'm really excited to get into is the features and demoing the form. So the form is dynamic, meaning that the inputs are based on the need requested to avoid clutter or redundant information that's not really necessary when an interviewer is filling the form out for an applicant. You can easily add critical communication. What I mean by that is that there's several spots where there's people have given feedback that there's some confusion about certain areas, so we left text areas to where we could leave notes that are attached to those sections and they're easily viewable, which I'll show you shortly. You can easily add additional names, homelessness information, enter and verify home address, thorough rent assistance information. You could add as many children as required. There's no constraints on how many or the length of information you need to put in these spots. You can just continually adding them and as much as necessary. It's easy to display add up and display the cumulative household income and verify when you see pay stubs, either when they show up if they bring them in immediately or at a later date, which I'll show you shortly. We created a lookup view. So with the lookup view, you can search by state ID or address, and it'll show any duplicates for that person or that address, which are displayed in chronological order from most recent to the oldest. So you'll be able to easily load that up and look at the requirements. And also, they're loaded up in a list, and the background around them is color coded to easily see their status, which is better illustrated with a demo. But if you had someone, I got help 3 years ago and no help prior to that, you'd easily see the date in the list would be listed first, and then you can see that the time from now to then really easily. Inside the lookup view, you could look at the expanded view, which I'll go to more detail in the demo on this, but there's a lot of neat features where you can easily get a high level view of the data and then approve it, which will open up an action button that you could click and go on to the next steps in the workflow, which is entering check information or denial, given a reason why. But this next section is like the next step in entering that information after someone's been approved or denied. So unfortunately, with the time constraints, there was some stuff we weren't able to get done. I'd really feel more comfortable if we had some deeper testing. Definitely need a database backup solution before we implement this and get it working, just so that if anything goes wrong, no data is lost. Some fine tuning on the front end for validation to avoid data entry error would be helpful. And we had talked about adding the ability to set someone to their status to no return if they haven't shown back up after 30 days of their initial form submission, but that's not implemented yet either. And also there's some minor bugs on the production build that we're trying to work out. But overall, as it sits right now, it's functioning and working. But it's good. It's in a good demo spot. So with that being said, I'd like to get into the demo. So let's move on over to the form here. Now, I have some information entered in here already. But if someone was coming in and needed help, what I mean by dynamic is like if you have rent assistance here, you can see that down here when we get to entering the address information, there's a spot where you could verify it. So let's say this person came in and they had their lease with them, so I could verify it on the spot. And that's what I did here in this example. But if they were to choose, let's say they wanted a gas voucher instead, in addition to the needing an ID, we explicitly say that we need a driver's license, and we ask for a license plate number as well, and give a box to verify if the license is valid or not. And if they don't have it with them at the time, they could come back later, and when you go to the approval process, that next step and the actions taken, you could verify that there again as well. So I want to focus on rent assistance in this demo, but they're all pretty similar. So if you get one example of one, the rest should be easy to follow along and figure out. So here, type of request, we put in the type of request. You can't see the pop-up here, but we got gas voucher or bus ticket as our other options. But here below, we ask right away, are they more than 1 month behind? Because if they are, we could just tell them, sorry, we can't help, to avoid frustration of giving a bunch of information just to find that out later. Here in these text areas, these are expandable, but you can enter in information as little or as much as is needed to be sufficient for any kind of explanations of the need or future plans. And then there's a spot to put in a referral if someone had a referral. Here, they can enter their name, middle initials optional, gender, again, it's a drop-down window, male or female, you can't see it, but then the age, phone number, whether they suffer from a disability or not. We'll go ahead and say yes. So we change some of the data on here. We enter their social security number, their last four, their state identification. On the state identification, it's really important to get this in here, and it's marked required, so if it's left blank, it won't allow you to submit. But this is what we use to look someone up. So we'll get into that more a little bit later on the lookup side of things. But you enter the state identification number here, expiration date and all that. If they've gone by any other names, you can enter them in this section. If they've gone by more than one, all of these are optional. So like if they just have like a common first name they go by, or maybe they had a last name, you could enter one, the other, or all three at least. And if they have multiples, you could just add them and remove them just as easily. So I had this checked earlier, but I didn't mean to. But you could actually, for homeless information, going back to how this is dynamic, you could change it to homelessness. And rather than requesting a permanent address like it is here, if you click yes here, that collapses and you've got more context here to ask why they're, where they stayed recently, why they're experiencing homeless, and how many days. And if they have a temporary address that they've had where they're staying at. But if we just click no, that goes back away, and we have the home address here again. We have the link here to Parcel Viewer. If you click this, this goes to Pierce County Parcel Viewer. The rent assistance. So there's multiple different forms of help out there, and this is, again, easy to enter them all in. If first off, they put in their monthly rent paid, if they yes or no if they receive any form of assistance. They can say yes on Section 8, and it says they get like $150, but then they have additional assistance too. Maybe they get, small sums from other nonprofits. So they could put the name of the other source of help, and they could put the amount here, and you could add more or remove them just as easily. Children, it's the same. We followed the same kind of logic here. So first child at residence, you enter the information, the relationship, school district, same with the second child, and you could add and remove them just the same. It's the same with adults. More detail on the adults. It gives a first and last name, their gender, and their relation. What's good to point out about the relation here is that you notice here it's spouse, and we got not disclosed, spouse, partner, roommate, relative, or other. If you choose relative or other, there's relationship details here so they could describe the relationship. So that way there's more context and it's not constrained. So it can meet any need. So here we could change to relative, and we could say, for instance, like maybe they're sisters that live together. Here we got this, again, same thing, relationship details. But if we could go to maybe it's their partner. Here, cumulative household income. It's the income for the entire house, all kept in one spot. So we the monthly household income, the total number of support, whether the applicant's a head of household or not. So we could say yes, they are the single female head of household. And then here, because I was told there's some confusion around this section sometimes, we have this text box, and we can enter in information. So getting laid off in 1 week, a month behind, last paycheck received on the 15th of next month. So again, some more clarification here, and this will be saved and can be loaded back up into the same spot. Here, income sources, they're laid out. We have these default ones that were on the form, but if there's any others, you could just add them and enter them in. So as little or as much detail as is needed. You could do here. You could remove some if you don't want them all listed. Here we enter in the demographic information. So it's just a count for. So let's say if we have 4 people here, and let's say the 3 of them are Latino, and then the stepbrother is white or something like that. So it's a total sum of all the children and the adults together. The landlord information is pretty self-explanatory, but it's just their full name, their phone number, and then their street address. But once you get all the information entered in, it's really important to come down here and click Save Record. Now when I click that, all this information is loaded into the database, and we get this data loaded successfully. Which brings me to the next section I want to talk about, which is data lookup and editing. So let's say we got this person entered, but they did not have their income verified. So let's change that real quick, and let's, well, we can't change it here. Let's enter a new record. So let's come back to the top, and let's get their ID. Now, if we go to lookup, and we look up by state ID, we could type that in or just paste it in there, in my case. But we could search, and we can see that this person has 2 submissions. So each of these submissions are both from LIM. They got one currently pending, and they have one from, as of today, yesterday, they put one in that was approved. So you can see by the color here that this is status of this is approved, but this is the most recent one. So you could tell them, oh, you're already approved. This one doesn't count. You can open this up, and you could easily mark this one as denied. Right? This opens up the show action button, taken button, which we'll get into in a minute. But first I want to talk about how we can edit data. So maybe this information was entered by an interviewer, and then somebody else is taking over as they come in for the second time. So they want to review things before they, as they're receiving information from the applicant. So they could click show form, and here it loads up all that data into this form. But this form, rather than creating a new record, updates the current record that is here. So in this area, you could come through, and not only can you use it to edit, but to look into more detail in each section. So it's all the information we just entered, but it's just here. And if you change anything here, it's really important that you go to the bottom and you click the update record button. If you do not click the update record button, none of the data will be saved, and you'll have to enter it again. But let's say we got the zip code wrong for the landlord. We could come in here, we could change it, we could click update, and now there's no message that shows up yet, but it's changed, and I could show you. But now let's say we updated this, and at the bottom, I'm having to scroll all the way back up. We have this hide form here, this button that will hide the form. You can click this button, and it brings us back to our general overview. And this general overview kind of just highlights some certain information. He was interviewed them last initially, whether they're greater than a month behind or not, if their address, their income, license, or bus primary transport have all been verified, help requested, and then here's to like verify that this is them when we're loading it up. We could ask them their last four, but this is like a high level in that it's decision making process. You could easily see if they have children and the adult relationships at the house, their reason for their need, and then their future plans. And if this is enough information, or looking at the information here, you could mark this approved, which we're going to do. But it's important if you change the status here that you click the update record button afterwards. That will update it in the database, so you can close this down and come back and this will be saved. If you do not do that, if you leave this window and come back, it'll be like it was before you ever looked at it. But now let's say we marked them as approved, but this goes to the next step in the workflow, which is the show action taken button right here. If we click this button, this brings us to this area which displays based on their needs. So this is their need is rent. If they chose gas or bus, that would display, and the relevant verifications and information will be shown here in the top. The bottom is the check information, and then an area for notes. So like if someone's denied, you could give a reason here, or if someone is coming to pick up a check but hasn't yet, you could leave a note here. But we'll just enter some information here real quick. So the amount promised, let's say they were promised $150. They were given $50 a day, and they owe $100 on their rent. Their second interviewer, we'll say Yuri, and before the money can be dispersed, you need to have that second interviewer to sign off on it, which is what it looks like on the paper form. So and then you pay to the order of. So this is May Madeline. Their name's up here as well, the applicant. So we could pay to the order of May Madeline. Check date, we could either type it in, or there's this pop-up that you can't see in this view, but the pop-up shows up and you could choose the year and the month and the day. The current day is highlighted, so we could choose that. Check number, we can enter in a check number, let's say 5010, and then the address that's going to the check. Now, the situations are probably different. Sometimes they're probably made out to the landlord, but that information's in there, so you can go retrieve it and put it in here if needed. City, say Tacoma. It's important to know that this gray text is just like a helper, like a hint. It's not really there. It's placeholder text. So when you type, that will go away. Okay, so now we enter this information, and then, but before we leave this page, remember, we got to hit the update record button. Cool, so that information's updated. We could show you, we could take this, we could clear this out. We could look up the ID, we could search, and now you can see the top one's green because we marked it for approval. And we come in here, we can see the information that we entered. If we hit show action taken, it shows the check information and the amount promised and any notes on it. Again, we could click the show form button, which disables our show summary because it's hidden. But we have the form here where we can edit and look over all the details. Hiding the form brings it back up so we could show the summary where we could change the status. Another important thing is looking up by address. Oops, so let me choose address first. So I could type in just the street name. See, there's nothing found here, but we could go to our database. We could grab an address that we have in here, and we could search it. And so what's really interesting about this is if you think you have multiple people from the same address, you could search by an address, and all the applicants that have that address listed as their primary residence will show up here, and you could access the information that way as well, and come in here and look at the adults by going into the details and looking at the additional adults here. But that concludes my demo. I really enjoyed working on this project. I learned a lot. It was a lot of fun trying to get everything working together, and I just hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy making it. Thank you. Bye.